You are here at Road Culture Rules. My name is Jill, and today we're going to ask the question, is solo RV or van life for you? And before we launch into the meat of the discussion, which is going to be really interesting, and I have a lot I wanted to cover, so now would be a good time to pause and go run and get something to write down with if this is of interest to you. But I'm going to just start with this interesting statistic, is that more people would rather receive an electric shock than actually spend 15 minutes alone. Interestingly, it's 60% of men and 35% of women. They'd rather shock themselves than spend 15 minutes isolated. Something to think about before we dive in. So we're going to take one deep breath, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and see you on the other side. Now, if you spent any time with me, you'll know that I don't really travel alone. I have a dog and a cat. Freedom is more hostage than companion. So I think if you asked him, he would rather spend more time alone than time with us, because whenever we go outside, he actually tries to get as far away from me and Lilith as possible. Just a little side note. So technically, driving or traveling solo is kind of a loose term, but I wanted to go over some of the characteristics and some of the things that will help you determine whether it's going to be a good idea for you or not. So I just want to begin with, there's a difference between traveling alone or living alone than living in isolation in terms of sensory deprivation. So to me, I never feel alone because I'm surrounded by animals and nature. So I think there's really important to define it for yourself. But the first big question that you'll have to ask yourself, is it voluntary or involuntary? I think people who choose to voluntarily travel alone are going to do much better than people who see it as an involuntary experience. And that means mostly you were kind of forced into this choice or this life, maybe not something that you prefer to do. It may be temporary, but I think there's going to be more difficulty for people who feel like it wasn't their choice, or if you've experienced a loss that wasn't your choice also. So that's probably the number one criteria for if this is going to work for you or not. Did you choose to do this, or did life kind of choose it for you? The second thing is it just your basic nature to want to spend a lot of time alone? And one of the things that happens, I think that's very different about this type of life versus living alone in a house, is that it actually feels a lot more isolating because you don't have neighbors that you know, you don't have locations that you know. If you're traveling a lot, you're always starting over. You've heard me say I got tired of telling my story over and over again, so I stayed put for a while because I needed that time. I still need that time to do some other things. But is it your basic nature to like to be alone? The third thing is some people are just wired to be more alone, and that's not necessarily an introvert-extrovert thing. You know, genetically, we're all wired to be part of a social support system because none of us could really live in isolation without some kind of human support, whether we want to believe it's a support system or not. But, you know, we can't make everything, we can't grow everything, we can't build everything, we can't make nature disappear. I think they call that solitary confinement in a prison. But even then, you've still got somebody bringing food to you. So the lie of complete and total isolation is an illusion, but you have a basic nature of some people prefer to spend more time alone. And it's really good to know that about yourself. It's also good to know that this can be a temporary experience. Just because you do it by yourself to begin with doesn't mean you have to stay that way. Which brings me to the next point, where sometimes this kind of life is just for a specific purpose or for a specific reason. And I think that really makes a great determination of whether it's going to work for you or not. I actually left with the intention of just doing it for 1 year and found out I liked it, but I never boxed myself into like, this is going to be my way I live for the rest of my life. So I think, you know, a lot of people choose a wandering, nomadic kind of experience to be temporary. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not supposed to do one thing forever. The next thing is we tend to, all of us, to be either internally or externally focused or driven. And what I mean by that is, if you spent any time with me, you know I like to think. So I don't need a lot of external stimulation because I actually have a lot of conversation going on in my head all the time. But that is stimulated by books, by ideas, by thoughts, by other people's experiences and journeys. So, but I'm very internally driven, and so I think it's really good to know about yourself if you have to have a lot of external stimulation in order to feel comfortable, or if you could sit alone, not doing much, and be pretty comfortable for a good chunk of time. So that's just something, one, to experience to see if you can get more comfortable, but two, we're all kind of basically wired a little bit different. So it's a good thing to know about yourself before you launch into all this. The other thing I'll throw out there, and this is a statistical thing, it's not a judgment or an observation. People who are more intelligent tend to be, and more creative, tend to like to spend more time alone. And I'll just tell you, from a creative aspect, you really need that downtime to get to your creative bottom line. So intelligence, I think, is more about questioning and learning, and so much of social interaction isn't about that. So I think that's probably why people who are more intelligent prefer to spend more time alone, but it's not a judgment, it's just the way it is. The other thing I'll throw out there is, do you like to solve your own problems? And that's kind of a combination with the next one, is that the more time you spend alone traveling, the more you have to figure out how to do stuff on your own. But it's also complemented by the fact that you need to be able to ask for help. And I would say the biggest difference between whether you're going to be good at this or not is, one, are you able to ask for help? But two, you're not somebody that relies on other people to help you. I remember the first time I had to back up and hook up by myself, because normally I had people, kind of directing me and guiding me. And I remember looking around and there wasn't anybody. And I'm like, I got to do this all by myself. And it took me quite a while, but I felt really proud of myself that I had done it. Sometimes I can do it in one shot, sometimes, 30 minutes later. But I think if your mindset is you're willing to do what you have to do, if there is no help, is very different than somebody who just assumes there will always be help, because you are going to be in trouble. The last two I'm going to combine, because people who spend a lot of time alone that don't want to are at much more risk for depression and anxiety. And one of the things that our society has become is we've been very good at distracting ourselves. I think that the great challenge to this lifestyle would be if we did not have cell phones or the internet, because so many people are using social media and the internet and the cell phone to stay connected. And we didn't used to have that. I think about how difficult it would be to find a place to stay if I didn't have a way to do research ahead of time. So we're kind of in a false reality right now about that. I think the really good test is if you have zero stimulation, do you still want to spend a lot of time alone? And I had one very profound example of that. I stayed someplace for over a month with no cell phone. I only had limited access to the internet. I had to go a distance just to check on email, and that was it. So I had to entertain myself. I didn't have anybody to talk to. There was nothing to do. It was a remote area. And so I did okay, but it is an adaptation. So if you're somebody that needs a lot of stimulation, you're going to first feel a withdrawal, and you're actually more at risk for heightened anxiety and more depression. So I think it's really important to know that about yourself. Sometimes depression is more situational than it is an emotional thing, and so I think it's important to be able to recognize the difference. There's nothing wrong with wanting a strong social support system. I think the problem is when you're someone who likes to be alone and you're forced to be in a social setting, it's painful. And the reverse is also true. If you're somebody who likes to be in a social setting and you're forced to spend a lot of time alone, it's pretty painful. So I think this is really important to know about yourself. And I also think it's really good to try to kind of stretch your wings experience, because we are very much overstimulated and over-socialized and over-distracted in our world today with all the electronic media. So I think that being in nature is not really for me like being alone, but for you it just might be. So I would say the bottom line to all this is it's really our perceptions and our beliefs about our situation and who we are that create a lot of our anxiety and our upsettedness. So I think it's really good to test yourself. I don't know if any of you have ever gone camping. Does anybody even do that anymore? And even when we were kids and there was only like regular TV, it took 2 or 3 days for you to detox from all the stimulation and to relax into the rhythm of nature. And so there's just a reality that there's an adjustment to it if you're not used to it. It's different than living alone, I will tell you that. I will ask, if you ask yourself that question, do you get easily lonely? I think that's probably a good question to answer for yourself maybe before you embark on some kind of life-changing journey in which it's going to be really difficult to get out of, meaning you've already paid a lot for an RV, you've sold everything, and you're like, oh my God, what did I do? But there's almost nothing in our world that we don't learn from, grow from, and can reverse or change the decision. So that's just a little bit today. I know that was actually a lot about whether the solo van or RV life is for you. You'll have to answer that for yourself. Time will only tell. So if you enjoyed this, I hope you will subscribe, and I've got videos on all kinds of things. You can find that at my YouTube channel. Also over at jillelizabeth.net, we'll just give you kind of an overview about some of the things that we're doing here. So I want to say thank you for sharing this time with me. And before we go, we're going to take one more deep breath for the road as I hope you will rise with the sun in your eyes, love in your heart, feet firmly on the ground as together we walk on Survival Road, one step at a time. Live free, die wild, my friend. I will see you next time.